Detective Carl here. Welcome to our Russian alphabet overview video. I appreciate you joining us in our ongoing efforts as we diligently continue to make progress in the uncovering of useful information that we'll be collecting. This will aid us in reviewing pertinent clues in regard to the primary goal that is set before us, namely the learning of the Russian language. Please remember that we'll continue to pursue and evaluate what facts we gather as our investigation continues. At this juncture of our quest, we wanted to emphasize to you that we have not lost sight of any goals that are set before us in regard to this investigation. With that being said, let me begin by saying, on a positive note, what I've discovered about the Russian alphabet is that the uppercase and lowercase letters visually look pretty much the same. So in my opinion, it will be easier to memorize the Russian alphabet letters in a shorter period of time, say in comparison to our English alphabet, which in most cases have no resemblance whatsoever in regard to their upper and lowercase visual comparisons. Now, I've also noticed that occasionally some Russian vowels, when appearing in some Russian words, don't always sound like the letter they represent. I've also found out that some Russian letters look like numbers, and some letters in the Russian alphabet look very similar to each other, but sound totally different. Also, some Russian letters look like our English letters, yet they do not sound or mean the same as our English letters. Now, some Russian letters do have sounds that we don't have an English equivalent for. I'll be pointing out some of these letters later in this video. In future videos, we'll occasionally discuss how we can wrap our heads around these particular scenarios as they come about, and how we can apply some useful workaround procedures to help us in addressing them as well. In Russia, children are taught in grade school as to where to emphasize the stress on any particular syllable for any given word. Now, we'll eventually work on adding these stress symbols to our evolving living dictionary, yet we'll cross that hurdle on some future date. My line of thinking is that for right now, say that someone who is truly versed in the Russian language, they should be able to interpret what we're attempting to say, regardless of whether or not we stress any given syllable during any particular conversation. Most of us are aware that the English alphabet contains 26 letters. However, the Russian alphabet has a total of 33 letters. Now, let's discuss a little tidbit of information for each of the letters of the Russian alphabet. As we proceed, the images presented in this video will depict each English letter appearing on the left, followed by its nearest Russian equivalent letter appearing on the right. Let's begin with the Russian letter A. It looks and usually sounds similar to an English letter A. The Russian letter B has the same sound as our English letter B as in boy. However, it looks more like the number 6. The Russian letter V looks like our English letter B as in boy. However, in Russian, it represents the V sound like Victor, in contrast to our English letter B as in boy. The Russian letter G sounds like our English letter G. However, its symbol looks more like our English lowercase letter R. The Russian letter D sounds like our English letter D. However, the symbol representing this letter looks totally different than its so-called English counterpart. The Russian letter Y looks like our English letter E. However, it has a completely different sound that is pronounced as Y. Another Russian letter, Yo, also looks like our English letter E. However, when we see 2 dots above the letter, we notice that this changes the sound from Ye to Yo. The Russian letter Zhe looks like our English letter X with an extra vertical line running through it. We have no equivalent in our English language for either its symbol or how it's pronounced. However, it is pronounced as je. I'll provide some workarounds in upcoming videos that will help us in addressing this particular Russian letter. The Russian letter Z looks like our English numeral symbol of 3, yet it has the sound of our English letter of Z. The Russian letter E looks like a backwards English letter N. However, it is best represented as our English letter I, yet it rarely sounds like I, and in most situations, it takes on the sound of I. The Russian letter Y also looks like a backwards English letter N. However, when a small curved symbol appears at the top of it, it is usually pronounced as Y. And the Russian letter Ka, which is one of the few Russian letters that actually looks like our English letter K. The Russian letter L sounds like our English letter L. However, the symbol representing this Russian letter looks nothing like its English counterpart. The Russian letter M is another one of those few Russian letters that actually looks and sounds like our English letter M as in Mary. And going on with the Russian letter N, looks like our English letter H. However, it's best represented as being similar to our English letter N as in Nancy, and incorporates a similar sound to the same English letter N as in Nancy as well. The Russian letter O looks and sounds like our English letter O. However, in many cases, this letter O has an ah sound resulting from a situation that frequently occurs in Russian grammar, namely a term called vowel reduction. We'll address this frequent occurrence in some of our future videos as well. And the Russian letter P looks similar to an upside down English letter U. However, it is best represented as being similar in sound to our English letter P as in Paul. The Russian letter R is visually identical with our English letter P, or it has the sound of our English letter R as in Roger. The Russian letter S looks like our English letter C. In most cases, it's pronounced with a S sound and never as a K sound. The Russian letter T is yet another one of the few Russian letters that actually looks and sounds like our English letter T as in Tom. Moving on, the Russian letter U looks identical to our lowercase English letter Y. However, not to be fooled, it has an U sound, not a ya sound. The Russian letter F sounds like our English letter F, as in Frank. However, this is another one of those letters whose symbol looks totally different than its English counterpart. And the Russian letter Ha looks like our English letter X, yet it represents a totally different sound in the Russian language. A sound which has no English equivalent. It does have the sound of H. In theory, its closest English equivalent would be the letter H, but it's not quite a cigar in this case. The Russian letter Sh, which is another Russian letter having an equivalent letter in our English, or having no equivalent letter in our English language. It looks like a poor representation of our English numerical symbol 4. A close pronunciation of it in English would be similar to a sh sound. And moving on to the Russian letter Ch, it is yet another Russian letter having no equivalent letter in our English language. It visually looks similar to our English numerical 4 symbol. It is pronounced as a ch sound, like Charlie, and from what I've seen, it seldom varies from that sound. And the Russian letter Sha looks similar to our English letter W, yet it is pronounced as sh, like shout. The Russian letter Sh is yet another letter that looks similar to our English letter W with a short tail at the bottom right. A close pronunciation of it in English would be similar, or a close pronunciation of it in English would be similar to the sound of shit. The following Russian letter really has no name, but it's known as the hard sign, which looks like a lowercase English letter B with a flag at the top. It has a specific purpose in Russian grammar. Even though it's considered a letter, it has no phonetic sound per se. To date, I have not come across this letter in all my reading of any Russian text so far. The following letter E, which looks like a lowercase English letter B and a lowercase English letter L appearing next to one another. This is yet another Russian letter having no equivalent letter in the English language. And we also have no combination of English letters to articulate it properly. So what I found best in order to make the proper sound of this letter is to say the French word oui, but leave off the beginning syllable, resulting in the sound of E. The Russian letter Marquise-Nak, which looks like an English lowercase b, it also does appear quite frequently in the Russian grammar. It has no sound of its own. Its primary purpose is to soften the sound of the letter that appears just before it. Going on with the Russian letter E, its closest equivalent in our English language would be the letter E. The symbol looks like a backward English capital letter C with a short horizontal line at its center. It has the sound of E. The Russian letter U, its closest English equivalent would be the letter U. However, the Russian letter U will always sound as U, and it will never have the sound of like that of its English counterpart. The Russian letter Ya, which looks like a backwards uppercase English letter R, it's pronounced as Ya, and it represents the meaning of I or me in the Russian language. Its closest counterpart in our English language would be the letter I. Well, there you have it, friends. A brief overview of the Russian alphabet. I trust this video was helpful to you. I hope to see you on our next Russian language detective adventure. So long for now.